Okay, there we go. Live to YouTube.
I don't think Steven knows he's muted.
No.
There we go.
Okay, thank you.
Now it's there. I give you the host back, or you want me to?
Yeah, go ahead and give me the host back.
All right. Let's see. There you go.
Okay, thank you. All right. Wow, we're piling in really quickly here. Welcome, welcome. Uh, SongNet once again is going virtual. We're having a really good time with this. Last month, Joanne Ledesma was just so blown away by everything that she heard. She said, "Wow, I've got to come back as soon as possible." We always have her scheduled for twice a year, so she is scheduled for July. Um, we also have Chris Fletcher, who's going to try to drop in a little bit later on tonight. She will be our next guest, and Chris is pretty amazing because I think she still might be with MI. I'm not really sure. But she was the one that was helping to get people hooked up with jobs in the industry, which is a really good thing. And she also does tour management and other things as well as managing her own artists. So she's going to be a really, really good resource for all you guys. So we're looking forward to having her next month. We'll have more information over the chat later on. For those of you who have not done this before, once again, be sure that you're aware of what's going on in the chat on the side. Because the chat on the side is where we're going to be posting different things. You guys can also post questions there. And when people, Chris, as a matter of fact, just logged in.
In fact,
So
you can save the chat at the end of the evening as well.
Right,
Save all those links and everything. You don't have to scramble and write them all down.
right. And then also, if the chat goes away or something, then we can still find you there. But and then if anything goes wrong or we can't hear you or anything else, be sure to check the chat so we can say, hey, maybe we can't hear you or whatever. So those are important things to know. Make sure that you are aware of the chat that's happening over there. Um, let's see. I think. Okay. So we do have a couple people from further east. We have Will Sims, I believe, from Baltimore, and disclaimer, who is actually John. Johnny, he's from where you from now, Johnny? You're coming in from I forget where you're coming in from.
Louisville, Kentucky.
Kentucky, that's right. Louisville, Kentucky.
I'm trying to fit the look.
All right. So everybody's going to be muted except for Ben. He's going to talk a little bit, and then we're going to have some question and answer time. So in order to avoid, like everybody speaking up all at once, please put your questions over in the chat, and I'm going to moderate that. I'm sure there's going to be a whole lot of questions, and not only that, but then you guys can go back to refer to that later on. So let's go ahead and give it up for Ben. So Ben McLane, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you're doing and everything else?
Hey, thanks everybody. Well, and I could say a million things, by the way. I don't want to bore people, but I'll give a little bit of background and sort of what I'm doing. But I mean, definitely, if anybody has questions, you could, if it's whatever that, you could raise your hand or whatever, because I don't want to avoid a topic or something that everybody feels is important since you logged in, because I really have no idea what everybody wants to know about necessarily. Jimmy, are there any particular topics you think the audience would want to know about that are legal related?
I'm sure there's going to be a whole lot of them. I had some questions about some of the new things going on with PROs. There's different things that are happening out there, like what was it, Cobalt and was that MLC? And there's Concours. They're kind of acting as if and sound. They're kind of acting like they're Sound Exchange, but I don't think they are like Sound Exchange. But they're kind of acting like a PRO. So one of the things I wanted to know about was what that's all about and how that works.
Okay. Well, I guess just to start, and hey, Chris, how you doing? Yeah, I've done this several times, and thanks for having me again. So maybe some people have heard me talk before, but I'm an entertainment attorney, and I've been doing this over 25 years. We have our own law office in North Hollywood called McLane and Wong. There's just two lawyers, so it's a small firm. But I got into the business because I just love music, but I really wasn't that musically inclined to be in a professional in any way. And when I was growing up, I always listen. I grew up in the Midwest. Loved to listen to the radio, and I'd buy records, and I was kind of a geek as far as just wanting to know who sang the song, who wrote the song, who produced the song, what label it was on, all that kind of information, and I'd read books about things like that because I didn't really know what the music business was. I was more of a fan, really. But a lot of that information stuck into my head. So when I finally came and decided I wanted to be a lawyer in the business, and I moved out here to go to law school, and really to break in, I was interning at some record labels and some management companies just to kind of see kind of what I wanted to do. Because there's really not one way to get into this business, even if you have a law degree. It's not like they really teach you how to be a music lawyer in law school. You kind of have to learn it on your own. If you're lucky enough to like get a job at a big record company or one of those big firms that reps like Michael Jackson or something, you probably can learn really quickly. But I never really had those opportunities, so I sort of had to kind of cobble my own way through that by doing it independently, which is fine. I probably learned a lot more maybe that way because I just kind of had to do it on my own. So here I am today. But over the years, I've worked with a lot of artists, songwriters, record producers, recording artists, small labels, management companies, agencies. Since we're more independent, we kind of deal with smaller situations. In the sense, like, if I'm dealing with a record company, it's usually a small label. It's not like Sony or something, because they usually use the big firms. But I've always excited about art, music, and new artists, and we still work with new artists and sometimes try to help them get situations and make introductions if we can help in that area if I have time. Although I've found, when I first got into the business, a lot of artists would need a lawyer, if they wanted to get a publishing deal or a record deal, for instance. They really didn't have, it was pre-internet essentially. So you really needed somebody like a lawyer or middleman or a manager to kind of introduce you around to the business, or people just wouldn't know about you. They couldn't find out about you. Of course, with the internet now and social media and metrics and people having followers and likes and subscribers and things like that, a lot of record companies and publishers or even managers or agencies are looking at things like that before they get interested in somebody. So, not, and probably most people are never going to get a record deal or publishing deal, or they wouldn't even want one anyway. But if you do, you kind of have to work on those kind of things. But essentially, I think lawyers and managers are certainly important. But I don't know if that particular role that I used to play, where I was sort of a middleman shopping deals, has cut back dramatically. But just because people get discovered different ways now than they used to, just off like the strength of a demo or a live show. Now it's more about numbers, whether it's good or bad, I don't know. I mean, essentially, you still have to have great music. So, and everybody here, I'm sure, is a creator on some level or works with them. So it's still the music makes the world go around and probably what gets everybody excited about it. But over the years, our clientele has grown, and we've had a lot of artists do well, and some kind of stayed independent, some moved up the ranks, and I've had some gold and platinum situations. Those are rare, but they're exciting when they happen. But these days also, I'm working with a lot of social media influencers, because a lot of them do music. But some of these young TikTok artists and things like that it's something that wasn't around a few years ago. And I've also gotten more into film and TV and reality shows and things like that need legal, not the major shows, but there's a lot of small startups and web series and things like that where they need legal. And those were things I didn't do years ago. I was strictly music. So now it's probably 80% music and 20% other types of media. And then I did write a book a couple of years ago, if anybody's interested. It's called Music Business in 10 Easy Lessons. And it's on Amazon, It's either in paperback or ebook if anybody's interested, or there's a flyer here too. So, yeah.
Cool.
But go ahead.
You kind of mentioned something about TikTok and some of the new media that's out there. What kinds of things are they coming to you for?
Well, it's interesting because a lot of these, I mean, let's take, for instance, there's several of them are young teenagers, and they just dance essentially. And they come up with these dances, and they'll do it to cover songs, but they'll have millions of followers watching them do these 15-second dances. And because they have that many, and they tend to be young and good looking, and they wear cool clothes and maybe have a cool animal or a friend or something in the background or something, some cool background, whatever. But because they have all these followers, it's pretty mind-blowing how they get so many, but they have to constantly, like every day, put a couple of videos up, or at least every day do one. So they're constantly in production, and usually they do them in their garage, but they all have pretty professional, lighting, sound. They do their own choreography. But when you get that many followers, there's brands that want you to promote them. Sodas, energy drinks, clothing, they'll pay. They'll pay thousands and thousands of dollars just to put a shout out or somebody wear or drink in the video. And so that's how they're making their money. And then a lot of that has led to a lot of these like Netflix type shows now that are geared towards the youth audiences. If you look, you'll see all these young actors and actresses you've never heard of who really have no background in it. And it's because they're getting hired because they have big social media following. So I guess these programs think there'll be more eyeballs because they'll attract these people's followers to watch the show, which is all advertising driven. So, things like that, but it's mostly branding situations, contracts like that. But you'd be amazed. I mean, I've seen them making a lot more money than I have from just music alone. That's for sure.
What kind of mistakes and things are people doing? Will Sims asked that question. What kind of mistakes do these up and coming artists usually make, and how are they avoided?
You mean the influencers,
or influencers, musical artists, everybody. I mean, right now, obviously there is a lot of problems that influencers have, and there's a lot of traps they fall into. I'm sure, like if Pepsi comes with you a deal, says, "Hey man, we can give you all the Pepsi you want to drink."
Well, I think you should. Yeah. Well, one thing you need to look out for if you're going to do a branding deal, whether you're an influencer or a musician or anybody really, is sometimes, let's say it's Coca-Cola, but that's a high level thing. But if it is, they'll say, hey, well, you have to be exclusive for a year, 2 years, which means you can't do any other kind of promotion for any beverage, any liquid beverage, not just a soda, but that would cover water, it would cover alcohol and sodas and energy drinks. So that's pretty broad when you think about it. So, me as a lawyer would try to pare it back and say, okay, well, they just can't promote a competing soda for a year or two or whatever, because that makes sense. But things like water and alcohol, different audiences, it's just too broad. Now, if somebody's going to give you $1 million or something for that kind of exclusivity, well, you're probably not going to argue with that, but it usually isn't that kind of money. But these brands tend to want to they go overly broad on how exclusive they want you to be, and the other kinds of competing products they don't want you hawking during a period of time where you're hawking their product. But so that those kind of things have to be worked out. And obviously some of these YouTubers, TikTokers have been using music and things like that, or images they didn't really have the rights to, and some of them have gotten their things taken down. So but some of that's getting worked out. I think a lot of these platforms are pre-clearing music, so you don't have to worry about clearing it yourself. But there's always a possibility you could have your stuff taken down, and if you have 3 strikes on your TikTok page or YouTube page, I think you lose the ability to have a channel at all, or at least for a period of time. So it's pretty the penalty could be strict. So you have to be careful about what you put up there,
Okay.
And if you're doing your own original music, never an issue because you own it.
Yeah. All right. Johnny had a question.
Hi, Ben. I'm Johnny. How you doing?
Hey, John.
My question is this: like in the old days, like in the 80s, 90s, the goal of a musician was to basically be discovered. So I wondered what your current take on the evolution of that is, what do you see the equivalent in 2021 of a musician going from nobody to somebody? Because it's entirely different.
Well, somebody in the sense that you'd have more people that know about you or making money in a career, or
In the sense of being a successful musician. So I don't know. So you could compare Epstein and the Beatles to what is the equivalent of that level of success. I don't like the word fame because I don't really want to be famous because I don't like people. But
oh man,
I'm joking. What would you say is the equivalent these days? Like the pathway, I guess what I'm saying is, what is the pathway to success compared to those days?
Well, I think some component of it has to be you have to upload
Mm-hmm.
music, audio, and I think visuals. I think visuals really seem to drive everything now. Now it doesn't have to be like a movie, but I think it helps if you and it, but people put up these static kind of lyric videos where it's just an image with music. That's pretty boring. I think people now are trained where they kind of want to see some movement, some activity, some charisma, some humor, something in what you're doing, and obviously if you have a signature look or a signature sound or something, there's some hook or angle, I think that you're going to attract more people that way. But if you can get 10,000 real fans or even more, obviously you're going to actually start to make money because those people are going to support you. They're either going to subscribe to your channel, they're going to buy everything you do, they're going to tell their friends, and it could lead to more of these sponsorship branding kind of things, because all these advertisers they're out there looking to see if anybody has an audience that they can put their stuff in front of, and they pay pretty well. And then obviously that can lead to touring opportunities and merchandising opportunities and, whatever makes money for you. I would think one of the goals is to make money, if it's not just to have recognition, but I would assume you'd want to make a living at music so you don't have to do other things. But I don't think there's one way to get there. It's just the old way of, maybe, playing the club once a week and then hoping somebody discovers you. I don't know if it ever worked that way, but it doesn't seem to work that way now. And certainly because of COVID, you can't do the same kind of live things you'd want to do. But just putting content out, I think that's good. But I don't want the trigger is, some people might put up 10 videos and it just blows up, and some could put up a couple hundred and they don't seem to get any traction. So I don't know if there's any real black and white with it. But maybe somebody else that's on here that does that might have some tips on ways to get discovered. I mean, to me, it's still about having great music, right? And some cool look and cool name or something, all that stuff works together. But I don't know, is there anything that you're not doing now that you think you could be doing? Or do you feel like you're doing everything and nothing's clicking?
Oh, I'm not worried about it. I'm looking for I'm in the planning stages. I'm building my website. I'm building my brand. I write music. I sing music. I play music. I design. And I'm doing a lot of it, and it's pretty overwhelming. But I don't care. I'm enjoying myself. So I kind of want to be completely 100% independent. But I'm always on the hunt for information and experience. And from gentlemen like yourself, you know a world more than I do. So I'm 39 now, so I'm in the crossover to hang on, things have changed. I need to get with the 2021 now. So Jimmy told me about this, and I was very happy that he invited me.
Well, the good thing about the internet, and I'm sorry, and whoever's talking, I don't mean to overtalk, but I'll shut up in a second. But I think because of the internet, it allows, I think there's 10 billion people potentially on this earth, that two-thirds of them have cell phones, maybe, I don't know, but I mean, I think there's a larger audience to tap into, and whether you're 90 years old or 15, I don't know if age matters as much as it used to. It used to be, oh yeah, if you're not between 18 and 25, forget it if you haven't made it by then. I don't think it matters. But you have to find an audience somehow.
So I just wanted to piggyback on that and maybe put it in a way of saying, I guess record companies don't work the way they used to, and artists don't get signed to agents and record companies the way they used to. Is that kind of the way we should be thinking about this?
Yeah, well, they still, their job is still to put out music and promote music and sell music or stream music, license music. But I think they're marketing machines. To me, that's the only thing a record label. Publishers are a little different because publishers are supposed to help you get collaborations and covers by artists. but record labels are just promoting your music. But those, the big companies like Sony, Universal, Warner's have these massive international machines with thousands of employees and, marketing and promotion and social media and this and that and the other and all these different divisions. And they've got boots on the ground in every territory. So, they're good for that, but of course the hole's so small as what gets in there, so I don't, so in that sense, the labels have always done that, but I think now they kind of expect an artist to have sort of built it up a little bit before they decide it's worth them getting on board. And by the way, it makes sense to do that because you'll get a much better deal for yourself if you can say, hey, I've built up a fan base of some sort that really cares about me. They want to buy my stuff. So I mean, that makes a big difference. So, I mean, that's the one thing I see that's changed, because used to be a label or a publisher would sign somebody just on the potential that they felt that person had. So maybe they had a big name manager or something, but now it's like, yeah, you have to be great, but we really need to see some evidence that people are reacting to what you're doing. And I really think that's the case. There's always somebody's going to say there's an exception to that, but we can't, you got to go kind of by what the norms are.
Well, in this day and age of influencers, especially, influencers, like you mentioned, are actually getting more traction now than artists themselves, because they know they're the tastemakers.
Yeah, there was God, I wish I could remember the name of the artist, but I heard a really good, 1 second, somebody's texted me and I got to text it back real quick.
One of the best examples of what I would call a YouTube artist is that song by Gautier, Now You're Just Somebody I Used to Know, which, I mean, he wasn't signed anywhere or anything prior to that, is my understanding. And if you look at that song on YouTube, it's got over 1 billion views, 1 billion. And fundamentally, he did that with two things. One was a very good song, but also that video is pretty low budget when you look at it. In other words, it's two people, their voices, and an artist who drew the background, and that's pretty much it. And so they, it was not a high budget video. It didn't cost them $50,000. So a good video coupled with a good song on YouTube, and then he started getting all his deals and everything.
Yeah, I don't know the exact backstory there, but that is a great song. It has a really unusual production, and everything about it it's like it came from outer space or something, and it appealed to everybody. I mean, Coldplay was sort of like that when they started too, to me, where their sound was just different but really accessible. So but yeah, that's what I'm saying. You don't really have to have that big machine behind you from the beginning, but obviously he did something. And I think he's from Australia or something, isn't he? New Zealand?
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
so
that's what
I mean, and there could have, but one thing I've found about this business is you peel back the layers of success, there's usually something there. Somebody just didn't come out of nowhere. There was some team or some support or something, that kind of helped usually. So it does help if you have a team of people, even if it's independent, a manager, band members or whatever, so you're not completely alone doing it. But I was just going to say that the artist I was talking about, she's called Frances Forever. She has a song called Space Girl, which is being played on Alt Nation on Sirius XM. It's an alternative rock song. It's really good, I thought, but I'd never heard of her. And then when I looked her up on Wikipedia, it turns out that, she did a YouTube video, I think in March, right when COVID started, of that song. And it really just caught on. And I guess it got 10 million views or something like that. And then she got signed. By December, she got signed to a label called Mom and Pop, which is Metallica's managers are part owners of that. And it's distributed by Sony or Universal. I don't know, but it's kind of an independent label, but with major backing. But apparently the reason she got signed was because she had all these views on YouTube. So, and other than that, she probably wouldn't have. And now they're actually heavily promoting the song at radio because she's got the label behind her. And that's probably what happened to Gautier too. It got even bigger once he got to a certain point but he eventually was signed to a label. And by the way, I work with a producer named Howard Benson, who's done a lot of big rock records, but one band he produces is called 3 Days Grace, which is a pretty famous rock band from Canada, but they just did a cover of somebody that I used to know. And it's doing really, really well. But doing covers is a good way to. I was just using that as an example because if you do a famous song and you do a cover of it, and it's really cool and has a great. Usually you'll attract a lot of eyeballs instantaneously because people already know that song. It would been this Gautier song so massive. I think they've already got several million views on their version of it. Just because probably it's just so well known. And I worked with a band several years ago that got signed to a record deal, a rock band called I Prevail. It was just 4 guys in Detroit that had never made a record before, but they did a cover of Taylor Swift Blank Space. They did a heavy rock, it's a heavy rock band. And they did a really good version of it. And because Taylor Swift has that army of fans, 12 million of her fans viewed their video. And because of that, they got signed to Fearless Records. And now ever since then, they've only put out original music, and they're actually pretty successful. But they started just by doing a cover. That's how they got noticed. So I think it's a good idea to do things like that. If you pick the right cover and make it a little bit unique.
Yeah,
That's just a tip.
Yeah, skateboard guy with cranberry juice. He that was an amazing thing, and he actually brought a whole new crowd of people to Fleetwood Mac because of that. And Fleetwood Mac wound up doing, I think, Mick Fleetwood did his own skateboard video, right? Copying that guy. So that was pretty funny. Yeah, I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, and Fleetwood Mac I think, what is that, Dreams? That recharted in the top 40 just because of the views. Because now to get in Billboard, it used to be based solely on radio play and sales and streams, but now they've included YouTube views and other social media so you could theoretically chart top 40, top 10 in Billboard without having sold a record or streamed if you have enough views of your video. So it's different. That's different, those kinds of things now.
Yeah, also, Will had a question here. What kinds of cases do you usually see or see regularly that, something that could be avoided just by knowing something?
Oh, well, I'm not a litigator, so when you say case, sometimes to me it means like people suing each other. But to stay out of trouble, I think you should always have an agreement with whoever you're working with, whether it's a collaborator, a producer, a co-writer, or a manager, whatever it is. I think you should have something in writing so everybody knows what everybody's supposed to do and who gets paid what and what the term is and duties and obligations and what happens if things aren't working out. Can you cancel things? Those kinds of things I think go a long way. And at worst case, you could have an email exchange back and forth where both the parties confirm what their agreement is. I don't recommend that over a written agreement, but these days you can, digital sign or scan sign. It's not like you have to be in the same room anymore to solidify an agreement. And you can type these things up. You don't need a lawyer necessarily to type up an agreement. Just write it in plain English. But I think that, to me, that's the biggest thing is people just have assume things or just fly by the seat of their pants. And then later they have an issue come up because there was a problem with people that had a misunderstanding.
Well, even then, there's still misunderstandings. Like, there's people that sign work for hire deals. I think there was one not too long ago, but it turned out that this guy's particular bass riff wound up making the song essentially. And so after it became a hit, then the guy came back and says, hey, it's work for hire, but I came up with that bass riff for your song, so you owe me more money. And that got into some litigation.
Well, if I was a judge, I'd say you lose the case, man. You signed a work for hire. What's the point of having a work for hire if you could say, well, I didn't mean that? I don't know. Yeah, but you got to be careful. If you sign a work for hire, it's usually very broad. It says that whoever's hiring you owns all the copyrights, and usually they just pay you a one-time fee, if that, and that's it. You don't get any royalties, and they could even put their name down as the writer or in place of you. You don't necessarily even get credit. So you have to be careful when you sign those things that they're worded. If you don't think, because you say work for hire, you could obviously word it a million different ways, but typically it means whoever's hiring you is buying you out of everything, no matter, and that's it. So if it is that, you try to get as much money as you can up front. But that's I don't know. That's unfortunate for him because he probably got a tiny little fee or something.
Yeah, also in this day and age of everybody doing covers and stuff, and also being easily found for something that sounds like a cover, that can be an issue too. I've been watching Rick Beato. He's got a really good series online, and he was talking about how this one Justin Bieber song sounds exactly like somebody else, and it was just amazing how similar they were, right down to where all of the changes were, so that he could layer them right on top of each other and play them together, and it sounded like all the same song.
That's the big defense now. When somebody says they infringe, they'll say, well, yeah, but your version that you say I infringed, you actually infringed because you took it from a public domain song or something. That's what happened with that Led Zeppelin case recently, and strangely enough, the band Spirit, who had that song Taurus that Randy California, the guitar player, has passed away, sued Led Zeppelin saying they ripped off the intro. Because his intro to Taurus that he wrote is the same as the intro to Stairway to Heaven, that acoustic riff that starts the song. If you listen to the two songs, they sound pretty much exactly alike. But when Randy was still alive, I did some legal work for him. He died like 15 or 20 years ago now, but I remember him telling me that he thought he had a case against Led Zeppelin, and I don't do litigation, and it was so old at that point, I thought he'd really missed his opportunity to go after them. And the only reason his estate was able to re-sue them was because I think there was a remastered version of a Led Zeppelin album. So they re-released the album. So it started the clock ticking on, because, when you have a legal lawsuit claim against somebody, you can't wait too long, more than a couple of years. There's a thing called statute of limitations where you're barred from going after it, unless you can prove you had no knowledge of it. It was hidden from you. But anyway, at the end of the day, if you followed that case, he lost because the judge said, well, that song, yes, their version sounds like your version, but guess what? Your version was based on some public domain, real basic kind of a, guitar riff that's been used many times in the past by other people. So they said he didn't really have standing to sue. So maybe that's kind of what you were talking about in the Justin Bieber thing. I bet,
Yeah.
but if you take that to the certain extent, that could mean no copyright cases would ever be valid because there's only so many notes, and probably everything's been done before, somehow, somewhere. I don't know. Yep.
Nolan, you had a question.
Yeah, this is a specific question. I have a couple of Christmas songs that we recorded, and years ago, it was on tape, and I've had 'em
Original
dig-
Christmas or covers?
No, these are covers, and I went ahead and registered them with the song licensing company, and then you had to just the what you paid was based on the number of streams or the number of DPDs, which I don't even know what those are.
That's like an iTunes download.
Okay. So, like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Silver Bell, Christmas song, Little Drummer Boy, and we did comedic versions of them, parodies. But anyway, my question is, if I paid for 500 streams and it passes that number, can you talk to me a little bit about whether I'll be
technically, you're supposed to
notified
go back
or-
and you're supposed to renew and extend your mechanic. I think
How would I know that it reached 500 streams?
well, I think it's a good faith thing on just that you're supposed to keep track of it, and then you're supposed to, in
How
good
would I
faith,
like
go to the.
when they say it's a stream? Isn't that like if it's on SoundCloud and someone plays it?
Yeah, SoundCloud
am I
or
supposed to
Spotify.
know?
Well, I mean, I think they think primarily it's talking about like Spotify and things like that because you make money off that. SoundCloud originally nobody made money, although now I think you can monetize it. But I think they're talking about a paid stream, like a Spotify.
Okay, so if they purchased it, all right.
Yeah, I mean,
And
it's
not
really a
just a
consumption thing,
freebie.
but obviously people can stream for free on Spotify, and some people have subscriptions, but it's all pretty much, it's really hard to know how they've come up with the formula and how you get paid, but there is money that's made off streaming, and in the old days, it would be based on downloads solely or physical sales, but now it's 90% streaming. So, but I think that's really on you. And if you're not doing massive amounts over
Yeah,
500,
I
I don't
mean,
know if
I should
anybody's ever
only
going to
have
call you
such
on
a
it.
problem. I'm
Well, I
sure.
don't, if you start getting like, 50, 100,000, maybe at some point, somebody, it's a good faith thing. It's supposed to be on you to continue to repay and extend that. But I think
Hmm.
most people don't worry about it until it actually becomes significantly more. I'm not telling you not to do it, but
Hmm.
I don't know if you really need to worry about it.
Right.
But on the other hand,
Okay.
it's just like if you wrote the song, you'd want to get paid,
Hmm.
so it's not fair to kind of keep, just because you don't want to keep track of things or to not pay people that are entitled. Like if somebody was covering your song, you'd want them to keep track, I'm sure.
Hmm.
So that's all. Just, if it gets extreme, you might want to revisit that. But, and is it
Okay.
usually around the holidays when things pick up, I'll bet, right?
Well, I haven't really started promoting it. I just got it transferred. I think I'm going to have to get it remastered um, to get it radio ready. But it's got
So
a
has it
lot of
been out
potential.
before? So they've been out before, or they haven't been out before?
They're up on Spotify and SoundCloud, and
So what did you do? How did the new
I
version
created
differ?
it as oh, how is the new ver? You mean
Yeah,
remastering it?
yeah. How does that change
I
it
didn't have it
significantly?
mastered as an album. The project was done on half-inch
Oh,
tape.
I see.
Then I digitized it. But no one's really gone in and mastered the whole thing. So if I want to invest in marketing it because they're really adorable, and I think if a few people caught onto it,
Well, and
it'll
sometimes
last.
those could
Hmm.
be, I mean, synced in
Yeah,
films
yeah.
too. I
There's a
mean,
potential there. So I want to, I have to get the files straightened out, but and I also want to get the clearances and licensing, everything, all that up to date.
and what about, did you say that you did this with some collaborators?
Well, my husband and I, this was a long time ago. We actually did this recording project as a Christmas present to about 200 friends and family.
Hmm.
And we took 8 Christmas songs and did parody versions. So, like a Bob Dylan would do "Oh Christmas Tree," or we have one with that famous chef Julia Child doing the Christmas song "Chestnuts Roasting on an Open Fire," and they're comical. Or we did a samba version, of another song. So they're all theme versions, and they're lovely. Either they're funny or they're really lovely.
Okay.
Country version of this, a reggae version of that. And so we called it a twist of Christmas. So it was a cassette basically. Now it's a little 8 song EP that I want to get
Okay.
remastered and
Well, I
release.
mean, it might as well, if you went to all that effort, you might as well put it out and see what happens. I mean,
Yeah.
many years ago, I had a client who just did a rough demo, and he had a manager that was connected, and it was only like a 10 or 15-second guitar riff, kind of like a Ramones kind of punk rock type of riff. It was kind of like a Surf Ventures guitar kind of thing, and there was no, and they just did ho ho hey hey. It was just for fun, and it was only like a 10 or 15-second thing. Well, some advertiser ended up hearing it, and they used it in the Super Bowl for 3 years running. Because the same company used it, it was that where that baby, I can't remember, it was where that baby was doing stock trades. This is going back about 10 years. I don't know if you remember, but this, I mean, he made so much money off that, because he owned all the rights and it was used in the Super Bowl 3 times. So you never know what's going to happen to a piece of music. He just put it out there, got discovered. And of course, it doesn't always happen that way, but it can.
Thanks for that.
Yeah. Jimmy, I noticed there's some stuff in the chat there. I don't know if those are questions necessarily.
Yeah, some of it is, and some of it I'm able to answer a little bit. Like, you know, what kind of agreements are there when you do covers and stuff? Covers have become a real issue, especially because now YouTube, Facebook, and all the other socials are tending to pull covers down if you put them up, unless there's some kind of a licensing agreement or something like that. And even then, if you don't post that there is a licensing agreement, or even if you do, sometimes I heard they can still pull your posts down. And I don't know what that whole thing is about, how that works.
Well, the biggest part was visuals, because if you do an audio, it's these mechanical licenses, and a lot of them, and that's what that MLC that you were asking about, that new organization. It's, they're doing blanket licenses, and that came out of that Music Modernization Act that would set up that body to basically do blanket licenses with all these platforms like YouTube, to allow them and people to post music and have them put music up, and then they have to pay these blanket licenses, just like BMI and ASCAP with writers. These restaurants and radio stations would play blanket licenses, and then just based on how many times a song is performed, you get paid. And this MLC now is collecting and paying out only audio streaming, only like Spotify kind of stuff, and by the way, and I misspoke there. Anything that's visual they don't, but anything that's audio they do. But the problem is when you add a visual to it, it makes it a sync license, and then that's what was causing takedowns, because hardly anybody had a sync license clearance. But now I've found that most companies are not taking down music; they're just monetizing the video. Because if somebody makes a video of your song and they didn't have clearance, and they put it up, and it gets 1 million views, the original publishers can actually monetize that and get a piece of the ad revenue. Not the person who made the video itself. They're not going to make anything other than whatever they can make off branding deals or whatever, because they have a lot of viewers or they have a subscription. But they're not going to be able to monetize that video. So instead of doing takedowns, I think most people now are just monetizing. You can click that button on YouTube and elect to monetize an infringement and get paid, or you could take it down too. But I've just found that that's happening less and less. I don't know. And are you hearing, Jimmy, that it's going in the reverse?
Well,
it was at one time where it was just automatic takedowns because it was all run by robots,
Yeah, and there are still some publishing companies or somebody that's really being a jerk about it. Like, I know the entire Prince catalog, if you try to cover a Prince song in any way, shape, or form and put it on YouTube.
Yeah, you're right. I think there may be certain artists like that have special clout with their publishers and just said, hey, made a dictate like that. Like, don't, make sure you exclude me from that. Because I remember years ago trying to get... a client of mine wanted to do a cover of Lou Reed and also a cover of an Eagles song that Don Henley wrote. And they tried, it wasn't a strict cover. They kind of wanted to add some new lyrics. So they needed a special permission for that. And they both got turned down because apparently those guys just don't want anybody to do versions of their music. They don't want anything else out.
Yeah, Chris Fletcher mentioned that it seems to be okay to put covers on Facebook, and they're primarily taking down DJs that are just using backing tracks that don't belong to them, because it's not a live performance. It's actually using a master sync license, I guess would be, right? So that would be a little bit different. But I have heard...
Chris, is that also true is that on Facebook, or are you talking about Instagram and TikTok and all those places?
That's just Facebook.
Okay.
We had to find that out because my artist was doing covers on Facebook, so we were.
Well, it would be nice if one of these days everybody's in conformity, because you've got Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and TikTok now and Snapchat, and
they keep changing the rules.
I'm sure I'm missing something, but but that's the other thing though. If you're going to put something out, you want to be on multi-platforms. You want to be on everything, not just certain things, because you don't know who's going to watch, and you have a better chance of being discovered. But some of these platforms have different rules and regulations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, John, you got another question?
Hey, John.
Yeah, sorry about that. I've got a billion questions. Everyone can leave. Me and Ben can talk. It's just fun. It's no problem with me. I've got to ask this because you
Johnny, can you turn down your sound a little bit?
Can I turn down my sound a bit?
Yeah, you're a little loud.
Or talk softer.
You mean my voice?
Yeah, it's really loud.
Your very melodious voice.
Just better?
I love you, dear.
Little lower.
Just better? Because I'm just taking it away now.
Little lower.
It's still loud.
I want to. Okay, this is.
Now we're talking.
Okay, that's better.
All right. I'll whisper. So, Ben, I'm assuming you got at least a couple of years of experience. So, I'm wondering what's the legendary story in your profession that you hear a lot. Can you tell us like some story from your profession that goes around, if that makes sense?
Hmm.
An
You must have one of those
anecdote.
stories that you're going to tell your kids. You know what I mean? You won't believe this. You can come back to it or take 50.
Well, I'm trying to think if there's something in my own career versus just something I've heard about. And of course, sometimes you hear about things and you don't know if they're true. But I'm just, and I don't know if you mean a good or a bad thing, but
I'll
are you?
make it up. No, I'm joking. Yeah, anything that you've heard, to be honest with you. Because I'll probably write a song about it by the time you're done.
Yeah, well, let me think about that because you caught me off guard a little bit, and I go through every day, and there's an experience every day, right? And then every so often, maybe there's something that kind of bowls you over that's being unique or different, and maybe it just and then eventually you forget about it or whatever. But I mean, I'm sure there's lots of like famous stories that they make shows about and behind the scenes. It used to be they had that show on VH1, which they don't show anymore. But remember about all these behind the music. Does anybody remember that? And they would interview. Well, for instance, here's one. And again, I don't know how often this happens, but they were interviewing Aerosmith and by the way, the guy who was Aerosmith's manager, I used to work with him, and he was a friend of mine, and I never had any issues with him. And at the time that he did this deal, it was industry standard. But the guy who managed Aerosmith, there were two guys in the early days when they were nobodies, signed him to one of those production deals where they were the manager, they were the producer, or essentially the record company and the music publisher. So basically, when Aerosmith wrote and recorded a song, the managers were making 75% of the money, and the band was making 25%. And then, of course, they had to split that 4 or 5 ways. And on all those big hits, Dream On and Walk This Way and all that kind of stuff. But that was a pretty normal deal. But then once they became famous and started making millions of dollars, they were like, wow, we're getting ripped off, and of course everybody sued everybody, and I'm sure they worked it out. But I mean, these days I don't think you'd hear about somebody hopefully signing something like that, because it just is so one-sided. But I mean, I hear a lot of those kind of stories, but more from the old days. I think people are a little smarter now, although this just happened this week where somebody wanted me to look at an agreement for them, and I said I was happy to do it, but they were so eager, they just signed it before they even had me look at it. And then after they signed it, I looked at it. It was the worst rip-off thing I've ever seen. But they were just young and they were just excited, and that fact that anybody was interested in signing them, they just didn't really care because they want to be a star or whatever. So, that kind of stuff, I don't know how interesting those kind of stories are, but they really can come back to bite people later. And then they can be on a TV show and complain about it.
Well, that leads me to a question, actually. What type of agreements do you? What's your main task these days with everything changed? What do you review for people?
Oh, okay. Well, I do a lot of. I think if you're a creator, there's a lot of collaboration agreements between co-writers and producers. That's where if you're going to write with somebody, you should have a split sheet and at a minimum. Saying with everything has to add up to 100, right? And then if you're the artist, and you're writing, you want to put that project out, for instance, as opposed to you and somebody else writing for, say, Taylor Swift's project. If you're writing for your own project with collaborators and producers, you really need to be the administrator so you can put it out. You can release it, you can remix it, you can put it in a movie, and you don't have to ask people's permissions, right? So those kind of things I deal with a lot. And if, with producers, I think it's important if you're going to work with a producer, make sure you have an understanding with them that you own the master. It's usually what they call a work for hire, which means you would own the master. It doesn't mean they're not a co-writer and they might be. But the problem is under the copyright law, it basically says anybody that makes a substantial contribution to a song or a sound recording is the co-owner of it. So anybody that helps you produce or plays lead guitar or sings on it or or whatever, you know, and it's usually equal split. So if you have two writers, even though if one person in reality only wrote 10% and the other wrote 90, if you don't have an agreement, it's going to be assumed it's 50-50, which may or may not be fair. And you don't want to have a judge say that. Same with, you know, and same with master. If you work with a producer and you don't have an agreement with them, it's assumed that they own half that master. And usually I think most artists don't think that's the case. They probably think they own it. I'm going through that right now with a young guy. I don't want to mention his name, but he's great. He's a great singer. He's like a Frankie Valli kind of a singer. He's doing like that kind of music, actually, like 50s, 60s covers. And he's just a young guy. I wasn't involved then, but there's a producer in New York that just does karaoke kind of. You know, the beats are already created, and she just provides these kind of karaoke tracks for you to sing over. And, you know, he paid, you know, he asked what she charged, and, you know, he paid her and they did it. Well, then after the fact, she says, well, no, that was just for my studio time. For my personal services, it costs me $110,000 if you want to own this. Otherwise, I own it, you know, and all of a sudden, you know, and not cool. So, you know, you don't want to have those kind of issues come up. It's better to have some kind of understanding in writing, or like I said, some kind of email exchange. And then, you know, sync licenses come up a lot where your music's used in film and TV. If somebody wants to put your music in a TV show, they usually should pay you a fee and, you know, give you a credit, and you'd kind of want to, you know, figure out how they're going to use the music. Maybe you don't want them to use it. Maybe you do. I mean, I think it's really important if you're going to license your music to a TV show or a movie, that you figure out, you know, get some kind of description of the scene, because it might be in a sex scene or a violent scene or something that you don't want your music associated with. And you find that out after the fact. So those kinds of things are kind of important. I do a lot of management agreements. I'm always amazed at how many people want to be a manager these days, because it's really hard, you know. And it's usually young people that just are excited and they just found an artist they're in love with, and they want to manage them. But, you know, sometimes it takes 2 or 3 years to get, and Chris, you probably know this too, it takes a while to build somebody up to actually make any money. And because a manager works on a commission only. But if you're going to, you know, hire a manager, make sure you have some kind of understanding of how long they're going to manage you and what their commission is, and, you know, things like that.
Sorry to hog you. I've got
Yeah,
one last
but those are the kind of things I go. And also, if you're in a band, you know, have some kind of arrangement, like who owns the name, what happens if somebody leaves, do you split the money equally from touring and songwriting, that kind of stuff. You really need to work out. Now, if you're a solo artist, you don't have to worry about it, but bands do.
I got one last sort of question, because I'm hogging the forefront here, and I think this question might help everybody in my position. Just from your experience, could you describe to me a stage in an artist's career where it would make sense to get somebody like you involved? What should that person be thinking? Okay, what types of things should be happening where they should be thinking, you know what? I should be getting a lawyer involved right now, you know, because
I think if somebody's throwing a piece of paper at you, a significant piece of paper at you, or they want you to sign some rights away,
so just
or
the
it's
obvious
an exclusive situation, or a long-term situation, or where you're having to give up a piece of your publishing or ownership, or those kind of things. If you don't understand it 100%, you should really, consult with somebody. Doesn't have to be me, but just somebody that knows what they're talking about, because it could save you a lot of headaches later. That's one thing in particular. But a lot of times it's just, you know, a lot of times I'm just consulting people. I'm just, like I'm doing now, I'm just giving logical answers to questions, which, you know, may or may not be helpful, but it's just based on what's in my head from doing this for so long and watching mistakes other people make. So hopefully you can avoid it. But I don't, you know, I think you probably know, frankly, in your gut, when you're over your head on something, because it's just like, you make music, I don't make music, so I wouldn't want to do your job, because you're an expert at it. So I'm assuming somebody that's been a lawyer for 25 years should be an expert at what they're doing, and you probably don't want to be an artist and a lawyer and a manager and wear all those hats if you don't have to, because then something's going to suffer.
That's my problem. I do. And I have to give up something because I want to learn everything. I guess that's got me as far as I have, but okay.
Well, it's good to be educated. I mean, I want all my clients to be educated. And there's a lot of great books out there, including mine, but that Don Passman book's really good, easy to read.
Already bought it.
Yeah, and and the Brabeck brothers book's really good. It's a little more complex, but it's if you can get through that, you'll be an expert on music publishing. I mean, there's a million books out there, but those are the ones that I can really recommend. But
all I want to know is enough to be dangerous to get to that point, because it's like it's all about experience. I think that's what all of the musicians that I've met, it's like, it's not about not wanting to do things. It's just the sheer gap in knowledge is intimidating. So you talking to me right now, I really appreciate that, and Jimmy bringing it along, and I think they all do appreciate you here. So keep going. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, well, you just focus on the music. I mean, I think some of those things fall into place when they're supposed to organically, but I think a lot of people have learned the business the hard way too. I think if you talk to any famous artist, they probably signed some kind of crappy deal coming up. So don't feel bad. That's just a learning experience, and usually those things get resolved one way or the other. One thing I've found is, if you've signed with somebody, now there's always some exception to that, but if you've signed somebody to a horrible management agreement or a horrible record deal, and the artist really is dead set against cooperating and showing up and working, that's going to have to be resolved and settled, or nobody wins. And usually that's what happens. People settle and resolve it and amend it and try to make it a little more fair. I know there's always some example of something that doesn't, but I found that's so. If you're ever in a bad situation, try to get out of it. Try to reason with people and not just pout about it. Really try to work it out, because I found that most people are real. Not everybody out there is Satan. And sometimes people really aren't mean spirited, and if you're straight up with them and try to be honest and fair, sometimes they'll work things out with you. But and maybe that's even an example of something I've learned in the business that might not be a sexy story, but I think if you try to work things out sometimes, instead of like giving somebody the finger or threatening to sue them or getting defensive, you can get a long way just by being being reasonable with people and honest.
Hey, Jimmy. Just wondering if Lindy or Mark or someone might have something they could share that they ran into on a legal basis that Ben could talk about, in their careers or in their touring experiences.
Sure, but we actually have some questions on the chat there that I think some people want to know. So Corey had posted about having all of his stuff together and when to look to you for those deals. So, do you see that on the chat there, Ben?
Are you asking me to look at it?
Yeah.
Which one? I see quite a few.
I know there's quite a few.
Which one is it?
Corey Simeone. He's asking about. He says, Ben, if I have all my songs together with metadata ready for syncing, should I go to you or someone like you to look over those kinds of deals?
For sync, yeah. Well, here's the thing about sync deals, sync licensing deals. If that's what you're talking, I found that most of them look pretty similar. It'll say like, hey, we want to, say it's a film or a TV show. We want to use this song in this scene, and we're going to pay you this amount, and we'll give you this credit. And then it's non-exclusive usually. It's rarely exclusive where you couldn't put it in another show. And then you'll make all your money as long as you have the name of the artist, the songwriter, the publishing company name, all that, the producer, all that kind of stuff. Then everybody will get paid on the back end. You can make a lot of money off syncs if you're with BMI or ASCAP, especially if they're played on like the Netflix or a major network. Or even on these MTV kind of shows, these reality shows, they don't pay any upfront fee usually, but they're repeated so many times, like Jersey Shore type shows, that you can make a lot of money, $50,000 a year or more, just by having a song in one of those shows. So I could look at those things. A lot of times, once a lawyer's gone through one of those sync agreements with you and you understand how they work, the title obviously is going to change. Maybe the fee might go up or down. And maybe because it's based on the scene and what movie or TV show it's in, that if it's an independent thing, it's going to be X. And if it's a major Tom Cruise movie, they'll probably have a bigger budget. But other than that, the boilerplate probably looks the same. So maybe once you go through that experience with a lawyer once, you could handle it in the future. But I guess it's up to you. Again, you could read books and try to get a handle on how all these things work, and maybe you feel like you're comfortable. But I mean, yeah, I look over sync licensing deals all day. I did a few today. I mean, they're quite common. But I found a lot of people, once you've done it a few times, you might feel like you got the handle on it. You don't always need to hire a lawyer to look at it, because the problem with some of those things is the fee might only be $500, or maybe it's nothing, or maybe it's $1,000, and then it's like, you feel like, wow, do I want to pay half of my fee to a lawyer or a third of my fee to a lawyer? Unfortunately, you get a lawyer's got to get paid too, but sometimes it's hard because it's not like you're making much on the front end. So I understand that too, but I look at syncs as more of a back end thing. Just like the example I just gave, if you have a song in a show that keeps repeating over and over, it's an annuity that'll keep paying you for the rest of your life. And the metadata, if you have it all correct, helps everybody get paid properly and quicker now. Because the problem with songwriting or these splits and things, like, say you have 5 collaborators and you guys haven't all agreed on what everybody's splits are, so it doesn't add up to 100%. Guess what? Nobody's going to get paid because BMI doesn't know how to pay it out, or ASCAP, so everything gets frozen. So, I mean, it's really important to come to an agreement with everybody on things like that, if that makes sense. I don't know if that answered that question.
That sounded about right.
Oh,
Okay.
Book titles.
I put
Don
up the
Passman, Everything You Need to Know About the Music Business.
yeah, I
And
put
then
that one.
the Brabeck brothers is what's the name of the Brabeck?
Music Money Success.
Yeah, Music Money Success.
Yeah, I put that one up there too. And then also one that I recommend is the Bobby Borg series. He's got a big series, but he has business basics for musicians.
Yeah, the thing I like about Bobby too is, he really was in a couple of signed bands as a drummer, and he kind of lived that life on the artist side too. Because sometimes you don't know I think he gives a good perspective on things because he's seen both sides.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I actually helped him with the first book that he did, so it was kind of cool.
Chris, can you recommend any books?
The networking book from Dan Campbell is good too.
Oh yeah. Doesn't he have a couple books like that?
He does, but that's the one that a lot of even schools use, music schools use for networking classes for musicians. It's networking, the full title, but you can look up networking Dan Campbell. That's a good one. If there's one for booking, because I do a lot of booking, it's How to Be Your Own Booking Agent by Jerry Goldstein. That's the one that I use in class, and that's the one I recommend to a lot of musicians.
And Dan's book, that's more about just like how you connect with people that could help you, right? It's not a legal book.
That's so important. I mean, the networking thing is really tough. Even how you present yourself, and what do you say to people? What about your emails? All those little things on how you connect with people. So it's an excellent book.
Well, and even in Bobby's book, I think he talks about if you're reaching out to somebody, say on email or Instagram or Twitter or whatever, I think you have to put a topic in your message. If you put a really interesting topic that they'll open up, then they'll open up. They don't know you. They'll open up the message and read it. And if it's something boring or super long or complicated, they might think it's spam, or just say, "Oh, I'll look at it later." So things like that are, unfortunately, I think you have to know a little bit about marketing yourself these days. They're just common sense, And if you're famous already, it doesn't matter, then everybody takes your call. But sometimes at the beginning, little things like that mean a lot.
But Bobby has the book that Jimmy was talking about, and he has another one on marketing. It's this big, thick book about how to put your plan together. And I said, when I saw it, I said, this is like 3 books into one. It's like, it gives you everything that you need. And it's all for the DIY artist. And everything is just laid out for you. So that one's a good book too.
Well, and the other thing I've learned about this business, you could read all you want, but you got to do it too. You got to actually experience it, or it doesn't mean anything. It really doesn't. Then you really learn it when you do it, or you actually put it into effect.
Yeah, it's
or
true.
you make mistakes, and that's how you learn. I think probably you probably learn a lot more by making a mistake than if you don't. But hopefully, it's not a costly mistake.
No, it's true. We've had hundreds of people through SongNet, and dozens of guest speakers like yourself that have given extremely valuable information, and plenty of information that has actually started some careers going. But even with all that, out of those several hundred, only a handful of people have actually been able to use the information to their advantage and have careers based on what they've learned at SongNet and beyond. So.
Well, and there's also, and it's happened to me. Sometimes you get information overload. It's
Yeah.
like, oh man, I just got too much information. What do I do with it? It's like sometimes you got to know when to stop or just focus, because you can, especially with the internet now, you can get 50 different conflicting stories on something. Like, well, you'd be more confused than if you never bothered.
Yeah, it's true. There's quite a buffet out there. It gets pretty crazy.
And that's why, and again, I'm not trying to blow my horn necessarily, but going to a trusted lawyer or manager or some established person, I think sometimes they'll cut to the chase, especially if you're paying them, right? They'll cut right to the chase, and they'll be honest with you, because they're giving you good experience and good, not as opposed to trying to hunt and peck on the internet and with people that God only knows what their motivations are for writing something or what their background is. Because there's, anybody can write anything now. That doesn't mean they know what they're talking about.
Yeah, that's true. Will Sims just had a question he posted about signing contracts to be on a music sampler. A lot of us have gotten to start like that. I know I'm on at least a dozen compilation CDs, for different projects and fundraisers, things like that. What kinds of things should we be worried about as far as signing any kind of contracts on those?
Just make sure it's a non-exclusive thing. Anytime you do try to make it non-exclusive, because you don't want to give anybody an exclusive where that would mean that song could only appear on that sampler CD. You could never release it yourself or let somebody else put it out, or maybe even put it in a TV show, I think. So I think that's the biggest thing. And credit too. Make sure you get a credit, because that'll lead to people will be able to find you, and maybe you can make money in other ways. Because sometimes these samplers, they're really weak in areas like that. They give misspellings on the credits, or minimal credits, or no credits. I mean, that's just a few tips for you, I think. But other than that, it's good to have your music out anyway, as much as possible.
Yeah, I used to think that.
I still think that. But that's just my own opinion.
Well, back in the 70s, there was a whole lot of things going on with the Christian music scene that I was in. And unfortunately, in some respects, we were all putting it out there as ministry, which was great. And, getting it out there, people were singing it in their churches and things like that. And we really didn't pay much attention to publishing rights or anything of that nature. And then it comes back around to bite you in the butt, where all of a sudden somebody's making money and your song is credited to anonymous. I've had that happen on 3 occasions now. So 3 of my songs are now credited to anonymous, covered by other people who are making money off of it. And
once the toothpaste's out of the tube, you can't go back and change. But I think that's where metadata. The good thing about, I think, today's time and place is because of metadata and there's more information out there, I think, so hopefully that won't happen as often in the future. But, and that's why these databases, like the MLC is putting together a database, which supposedly is free. Anybody can access it. And I think ASCAP and BMI just joined forces where it's open to the public, where they're trying to combine their databases, where they not only have list of the songwriter and the publisher, but also the recording artist and the producer and maybe some of the musicians that played on it, as much information, so it's going to help in the long run to make sure everybody gets paid and credited properly. So, but I think, Jimmy, in the 70s, that probably happened a lot.
Oh, more than, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I started SongNet, because, it was the Gap Band. I had done some guitar work for them, and I went to go see them backstage at the Greek. And all these guys, talking to them for a while, and they're all flat broke. And I said, you guys are one of the biggest bands out there. What the heck's going on? And they told me about the bad contracts that they had signed and the way that they had signed their lives away. And, that recoupables. That was a big one. Recoupables. Said, damn, everything was recoupable, and we didn't know that, and they had no idea what recoupable even meant. They thought it was just pay back certain expenses, but no, it was everything.
Right.
And they didn't realize that it was like a bad 360 deal and then some.
Yeah. Well, although I can tell you now, because I've dealt with him, Charlie Wilson now, who's still, I mean, I just had a client pay him $180,000 to come and sing for an hour at her party. So he's hung around in the business, and because he had all those hits, and he's still having them, he's still making music. So now he's doing okay. But yeah, in those days he probably was.
Oh, he was hurting bad. Yeah.
Too bad, but now he's doing okay. I don't know about the other guys in the group. And by the way, I used to also work for this guy, Lonnie Simmons, who signed the Gap Band. He had a label called Total Experience.
Yes.
If you look at those, you dropped a bomb on me days, it'll say Total Experience. Before that, they were on Shelter Records, which was Leon Russell's label. I think their first tour, because they were from Tulsa. And they probably didn't make any money in those days either. But at least when they were on Total Experience, that guy had a deal with Polygram, which is now Universal. And that's why all those songs got on the radio, because they at least got promoted. So at least those guys could go out and make money on the road and stuff. But and I think they make a lot of money off samples now, because even if they just own the writer's share, they probably gave the publishing away. But you can still make a lot of money on writer's share if you have big hits and your songs are sampled by all these big rappers and stuff. So, but I mean, probably when you caught him in that era, it was sort of like, even I had lunch with Lamont Dozier many years ago, and I remember him telling me in the 80s he was super bummed because Motown had sort of run its, he wrote all those big songs for the Supremes and things like that, or co-wrote. And in the 80s, it was before the big Motown resurgence. So in the early 80s, he was thinking about selling all his rights because he wasn't making any money, believe it or not, off BMI and stuff. And then, of course, he hung in there, and it came back in a big way. But I mean, he said he was like really bummed and broke. Like, it's hard for me to believe somebody's written 20 number one songs. But they did sign bad agreements in those days.
Yeah. And so that's why it's important to be educated. And that's why, for us here at SongNet, we try to make sure that people are educated enough so they don't do problem things like that. And,
yeah, but I don't, sometimes you have to go for it, try to get the best deal you can, but you don't want to never sign anything and never work with anybody. And then, because you do need alliances and opportunities, and sometimes you just have to go for it and hope for the best, because there's not always a perfect situation, especially at the beginning. Once you're more established, you have more leverage to get better deals. But that's what I was saying. I think most people that are famous now, it's kind of like a stepping stone thing. They had a sort of, I'm not saying you have to like pay your dues, but sort of in a way you do to get there.
Yeah. Well, there's interesting ways around it. I was just at a marketing class, a free marketing class that the Indie Bible people put out there, I guess, this afternoon. And it was kind of interesting for me because it validated a lot of the stuff that I used to do and still do, which was kind of fun.
Bad stuff or good stuff?
Let's call it edgy stuff.
Well, what is that? You have to explain.
Well, for example, one of the things that I used to do back when I had my bands out there is it'd be sniping, where we would go to a concert where a band that sounded like us was playing, and people were paying money to see them, and we would hand out flyers saying, hey, we sound just like these guys, man, and we're playing a free gig at the park, and talk it up. And so basically we'd be stealing their fans, and that's just hustling. That's a little bit of hustle. It's right. not the most ethical thing, but at the same time, we were doing that kind of a thing. And sometimes it worked out really good, because then they'd hear about us. Hey, man, these guys are trying to steal our fans, but they actually do sound pretty good. And well, why don't we share their fan base? And so we were able to get opening gigs, with slightly bigger artists and stuff. So that was very cool, and share their fan bases, and everybody made money. Everybody wins.
Well, if there's a way you can make sure everybody benefits from things, then everybody tries to help each other. If somebody feels like they're getting used, then they don't like it. But I've worked with some managers, especially I work with like boy bands and girl groups, and that's what they would do. They would, if One Direction's playing at the Rose Bowl, They're like, just go out there, dress up, look cool, and just go talk to all the young girls in line and hand them a CD. You know, and in those days it was a CD. Now I guess you'd have to give them a card or something to listen to. But that's how they got their fans, and you know, that because that was just a way to like, I'm not sure what you call that, but it's like just scorched earth. You know, just go right to the source. You know. Because all the fan base is there, you know, but it's if you think about it now, it's sort of like these recommendations online. If you like this, you're going to like that.
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly how it works. And then of course you go on the fan pages for those artists online. You know, you go to their YouTube official page and say, "Hey, I really like this song. It sounds like my song." That's da-da-da, you know. So it's a little different. But you know,
well, yeah, if you're a smart marketer, and again, I know it's probably artists don't want to have to become a marketer, but if you take the time to do it, you know, and do it right, you could probably get a following by doing what you're talking about.
Yeah.
You know, going directly to the source and just say, hey, if you like this artist, maybe check my stuff out. But it takes somebody's got to take the initiative to do all that networking. That's what like Chris was talking about. That's networking. You know, that's a big part of the business, unfortunately. Yeah. I know even me and Jimmy, that's how I know you. And and it's just going, you know, even as a lawyer guy, it's just like, well, you know, I'm going to go to that club and try to meet some people. I'm going to go to that party and try to meet some people, you know, and that's how you build up your, you know, your following, whether it's you're a lawyer or an artist, you know, you kind of have to do it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. We've all got stories about that one. Yeah. Mariah Carey's one.
Are you doing a lot of Zoom meetings now, Ben?
Yeah, I am. I mean, I still prefer to meet people in person. Obviously, Zoom has the advantage of maybe you can tap into more people. But what I don't, you know, I just hope it doesn't get to the point where people just solely do things on Zoom, because I don't know. It just, and maybe I'm just sound like the old guy, but you know, that's not how I grew up. You know, having face-to-face meetings. I think if you really meet somebody in person, you make a better connection. I'm not saying you can't make one over Zoom or over the phone, but I don't know if it's exactly the same.
Yeah, I just think after this pandemic, the whole industry is going to have to learn how to work with the new tools and skill sets that have changed.
Well, I certainly think live streaming is going to be a big thing for performers, because just think about it. You could do, like, say you're on tour and you're only playing 3 or 4 shows a week. That leaves you 3 other days. Why couldn't you do a live stream even from your van or an alley or something, just to, and then it's like doing a show, you know, and you could supplement and you can monetize those things now, whether you're selling merchandise or people are just giving you donations. I mean, I think there's a lot of things we've learned through this to supplement the old ways of doing, even though all these things existed before. It was like nobody really made them a focus so I don't know. I mean, in a way, I think maybe it's going to be it's probably beneficial in the big picture. And I'm not saying the death part of it, but just forcing people to have to rethink and do things a little bit differently. But I know back in March, which is a year ago now, I was pretty freaked out at first, because I just thought the world was going to come to an end. And it's like, wow, how's anybody going to work? Is anybody going to have any money? But it ended up people found a way around things.
Yeah, Flo just asked something here. Do you have any templates for work for hire and things like that on your site?
Well, I do, but yeah, I mean, I saw somebody ask about, you know, if you go online, there are some good work for hire forms, but the problem is just be careful, because I've always found with those online forms, they're incomplete. You know, there's something missing or something in there that should or shouldn't be there. So just read it carefully. But if you're going to do a work for hire, just make sure that if you're hiring somebody that, you know, you own the copyright, and if you're just plan to pay them like a one-time fee, it needs to say so, because otherwise you could pay somebody a royalty, but usually when you're doing work for hires, you probably don't want that obligation. You just want to just pay somebody and own it. Like if you're hiring an artist to do something, or you're hiring a guitar player to play on your record, that's usually how it works. But, you know, but there's other things in there too. So like if you're hiring Slash to play on your record, you probably want to be able to use his name and likeness to promote it. Well, guess what? You better put that in your work for hire, because most of them might not say that, right? You know, so you just have to you might have to customize it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or
And then,
Jimmy. Jimmy's better than Slash.
well, one of the things that I do is I try to partner up and make an entire project out of that. There's an artist that has been coming to SongNet quite a bit, Catherine, and Catherine is a great songwriter, and she asked for my opinion on something. I threw her a couple lines. Next thing you know, she makes me a co-writer. And I said, okay, but at the same time, that's good because now, I can work with her. She can work with me. We don't have to get really crazy on split negotiation stuff because we're partners on this particular song and hopefully on an entire project. So that makes more sense. She doesn't have to pay me for a particular thing. I don't have to pay her for a particular thing. And we
Well,
can make
but
this.
the one thing that about that is that administration point. It's like if you create something as a partner, you both basically own it jointly, and you both mutually decide what happens to it. Or you could stop one party from doing something. So if you're the primary artist on that project, you'd probably want them to have you agree that I can put this on my record first before you can, or I can put this in this TV show, and you can't say I cannot. You know, that's called administration. But I don't know if that was an issue, but sometimes it is when an artist is working with collaborators. They don't want the collaborators to restrict or tie their hands in any way.
Right.
Doesn't mean the collaborators won't get paid and credited, but they're basically given a blanket license in advance. You have to put that kind of language in the work for hire
Yeah,
or the collaboration agreement.
Yeah, and in fact, with all of the bands that I've had to go, and go backwards in time and say, hey, I need an agreement that I could administrate all of the recordings that we did, so that they can be used.
Were you able to go back and do that retroactively or not?
Oh yeah, because all the band guys, because they know we're probably not going to make any money, so that they said.
But if you don't do it at the beginning, as soon as somebody walks out the door, they could get hit by a bus, and then maybe you'll never get them to sign that, and then it screws everything. So it's better to do it at the beginning in a perfect world, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, Nancy Killel mentioned that she had a producer refuse to sign a work for hire and wanted thousands of dollars to get her master back. It was kind of a hard lesson to learn, but she learned that.
Well, hi Nancy, what did you do? Did you get that resolved, or did you just forget about it?
Yeah.
Did she say?
She didn't say. Nancy, you can unmute and go ahead and speak. She said, "Let it go."
Okay. Okay. Well, we all go. I was just mentioning I'm trying to help somebody out of a similar situation right now, like that. And sometimes, you either have to bite the bullet and pay him, or you just scrap that and just re-record it, or just don't use it, or just say, well, I'm going to put this out and you sue me, and they probably won't.
Yeah. Well, Taylor Swift's thing is a real big deal right now with that. So and I guess the way that her deal worked is that it'll expire pretty soon, so she can go ahead and redo all of those things. And
the re-recording. Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's all right. If you do sign a record deal, there will be a provision in there that usually says for a period of 5 years minimum after you release the record through the label, you can't do a re-record. So if you got dropped the day after you recorded that song with the label, they'd still have a 5-year exclusive window where you couldn't re-record that. But after 5 years, you could do your own version, which with her, I think pretty much most of her back catalog now is over 10 years old. The big hits from the way old days of, when she was really doing country stuff before she got with Max Martin. To me now, she's a pop artist, although I know she did a folk record. But after, but I've also seen some, they call those re-recording restrictions. I've seen some now that are up to 10 years. Because I think labels now figure they can only make money off streaming, so they need a longer window of exclusivity.
Hi, Ben. It's Nancy Killel, and I wanted to say hello to you. And I concur with you earlier that I think it's always nicer to meet people in person when you have the opportunity. I think it's a better way to network, if possible. And then as far as this producer I dealt with, I let it go. It was a very invaluable lesson. I just learned at that point. But I felt that, look, I have an option to re-record it at some point. It's my song, and that's what I'll end up doing at some point.
Well, if you didn't sign anything with the producer, you could re-record it the next day.
Exactly.
But it just means you kind of wasted that other version. But that is one way around it, you know. And
I did.
unfortunately, and I'm sure there's two sides to every story, but there's some people out there that are just irrational or have big egos, or you just will never be able to reason with them, no matter what, you know. And it's just sometimes you just have to move on.
Right. I think most of it, I think what I didn't understand, somebody, I think it's Flo, is asking a question about if the label owns the masters or who owns the masters. Well, you know, I'm independent. I was under the I guess I was under the impression that, you know, I own the master. I had done business with this person prior, as a co-writer with some, and he had signed all the paperwork off on our whole deal. So when I went in on my own with my own song, I just assumed, which is the worst word to ever use.
Well, remember, assume, if you break it apart, it says ass. It makes an ass of you and me. An ass of you and me.
Exactly. And that's why I realized it was my mistake because but I did assume it since he had done it before. I said, why now? I don't know exactly, but it's really unfortunate. But I let it go. And at some point I'll recut it. I just will. But I'll admit, he did a sweet job. He really did. It's really sad.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. And by the way, Flo, your question, if you do a re-record, you will own the new version, but the original label will still own the original version. Hopefully that answers your question. So that's why Taylor Swift now can make a lot of money off her new version. In fact, I think one of her new songs is #1 country radio. So that means her new version is probably going to stream a lot and sell a lot. And she'll make all the money off that, off the new version. But it'll also kickstart sales of the old version, probably. Which the label will still make money off of. And hopefully if she's recouped, they'll pay her a royalty. And like Jimmy was saying, that whole recoupment, you know, that's the game. I think a lot of people, you know, unfortunately, you know, when you sign these agreements with people, it usually says any money that the label or the publisher spends, or even a manager, if they're paying for you for recording or promotion, travel, whatever, they get to recoup all that money off the top before you get paid, you know. And that's fair for the most part if they're taking the risk and blowing up your name and value in the marketplace. But you know, there are sometimes you can get certain things that aren't recoupable, like maybe the cost of the video or the cost of certain, you know, promotional things. Maybe you could make half recoupable or excluded from recoupability. Those are negotiable things. But basically, old school, you know, any money that a label spends, they get to get paid back first, right off the top. So obviously sometimes, you know, people, you know, and that's the thing, you know, some of these groups, they sold 1 million records and they still didn't make a dime. Well, it's because the label spent more than the million to make that record and promote that record. So their band's still in the hole. And sometimes it's true and sometimes it's not. I remember I was working for, if you know who Paul Butterfield is, his estate, and they came to me and they're like, hey, Paul Butterfield, you know, he had made ahead of me all these big records in the 60s and the early 70s. And the label, well, at least Bearsville was the label, which was Albert Grossman, Dylan's manager, ran that label. So in the second part of his career, he was on Bearsville, distributed by Warner Brothers. And these records sold hundreds of thousands of copies. And even 40 years later, he was not making a royalty. But apparently they were saying, well, yeah, but back then in those days, we were like giving you cocaine parties and hiring hookers and all these kind of things. And they were actually, you know, recouping all that stuff.
Sorry, I'm listening now. What?
They were recouping all those things. And they were like, they don't know if those were true or false, but you know, sometimes you wonder, and plus it's just 40 years later. It's like, isn't there a point where you can write that stuff off the books, you know? But most of these labels don't. They just keep track of every dime they spent for whatever it was.
Yeah, just to follow up on the masters thing, I'm a little confused on this because, okay, like my producers who I work with pretty much have the original, like all the stems and all that stuff. And if you want to get it from them, you know, per song, it's $50 or $100 probably, something like that. Does that mean they own the masters? And where does this come up? In other words, if there's a master sync fee, and it's kind of vague who owns the masters. I never even thought about this. I mean, because these master sync fees for an indie artist are, $500 or $1,000. Does that mean I have to split that or give it to my producer who did it, or
Well, that's why you have an agreement with them, because remember I mentioned under the copyright law, anybody that makes a substantial contribution co-owns the master sound recording. And it's going to be assumed it's 50-50 between the artist and the producer. But if you have an agreement with them that says, hey, I'm paying you $300 and you're transferring me all the rights to the master, including the stems, then you own everything. And,
Well,
and you,
I mean,
you
I've
might
paid
say,
them-
but even in that agreement, it would still say, I'm just paying you $300 and that's a buyout, or I'm paying you $300, but I'm still going to pay you, 20% of what I make off a sync master fee, but that's in the agreement. If you don't have the agreement, nobody really knows who's owed what. In fact, you probably need everybody, including you and the producer, to sign off on that sync, because you both own the sound recording, because they didn't waive their rights in writing. So I would probably recommend having, and by the way, you could have some email exchange, but something that says you own it, or at least you administer it, and you can be the collection agent and do all the deals, and then if you owe anybody, that's on you. But otherwise, the sync company's probably going to say, well, do you warrant and represent that you own and control these rights? Well, no, I'm not sure. They're like, well, come back later when you do, or make sure that other person signs our agreement too. I don't know, have you encountered that, or are you just going and signing these things and not worried about it?
There's nothing that's been financially that important to bother with, frankly, at this point.
But I'm just saying, the sync companies usually, they don't want to get sued by a collaborator.
No, of course.
For infringement, so they'll usually say, do you control all the rights?
Yeah, I mean, if it came down to it and somebody gave me a master sync fee and I would split it, I wouldn't. I mean, here's the thing, I've already paid them up front. I've already paid them for a work for hire. But
they didn't sign anything, it's just a verbal handshake?
Well, no, they said that, I have the rights.
Okay.
But, I'm not
Well,
sure.
That's pretty good. That probably could be interpreted that you do own everything.
Yeah.
But why aren't they giving? But if I were you, you should at least get copies of all the masters and the stems, because if somebody controls it, to me that's problematic.
Yeah.
If they're keeping all that in their hard drive and not sharing it with you.
Right.
But maybe you're fine with that, and they're your friends, and somebody's got. But to me, you should have a copy. They should have a copy. Is that possible?
Yeah. Well, I don't have a copy of all the stems. I have a copy of the WAV file.
Okay.
But not all the stems.
But
that's a much bigger file, and it's much more. They have to take a lot of time to put that and send it over and all this other stuff.
Well, it may be worth, and again, it's whether you think it's worth it or not, but it might be worth paying a little bit extra to have them do it, because sometimes I've had that come up where I just had this happen where one of my clients didn't have the stems or the instrumental stems, and they wanted to have her sing in a show, and instead she had to bring her whole band in to do it and pay them to recreate the track. She didn't have the instrumental stems. Otherwise, she could have done the voiceover with, and she did pay for everything, but she didn't. And the producers were being jerks about giving it to her, saying, "Oh, it's too much work," for the reason you just said. But it cost her a lot of money, and eventually we got the stems.
But I guess the follow-up question is it only the master sync fee where the money comes into play? They don't have any publishing. They don't have any writers.
Well, I don't know. I don't. When you work with a producer, are they adding any melody? Are they providing a beat? Did they give any lyrics?
The song is all
okay. Because again, usually in a producer agreement, there would be a provision in there where the producer is saying, "I acknowledge I have no songwriting, no publishing," but because some producers do co-write and they do add melody, and they might add some guitar riff that's just like the hook of the song. And to me, that might be songwriting. Maybe you might think it's arranging. I don't know. It's like, they might think they're a writer and make a claim later, but not only syncs, but if you made money off streaming or you made money off downloads or physical sales, usually you would give a producer a percentage of that unless you did a buyout, but only on the master side of things, not the songwriting side, because they're not a songwriter. Right. So, but if you're not really making any money, it's like,
nobody cares. Of course,
nobody cares. But if you were, I work with a lot of producers. On average, producers make 20% of the artist share of the net master use income. Now that could be higher or lower, but just to give you an example, you know.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, so, unless you're paying somebody out and just saying, hey, $500 buy out, that's it. Even if I make millions of dollars, I never have to pay you a dime. But you'd have to put that in writing.
Yeah.
Signed by the producer.
Yes.
Yeah. Does that help?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that kind of answered Flo's question too about that. Did that answer your question, Flo?
Kind of. Yeah. I think, excuse me, my main question has been this, because I'm getting into the production phase of my stuff. And I've met a lot of producers and had conversations with different people about the mastering aspect of it. And my past experience with a producer, though he did co-write and he did add instrumentation, so I get it with him. But a lot of producers I've been talking to here in LA want to take a percentage of the master, plus they want payment. And they're saying that most producers are doing that. And I guess they're modeling themselves after the Max Martins and, you know what I mean, the Timbalands who, yeah, I get it. If you're Rick Rubin, Max Martin, or Timbaland, you're going to definitely take a percentage, that's just automatic. That's a whole other game. But so my question is this: I don't want to offend or put a bad taste in a producer's mouth if, obviously a work for hire is a legal document. But if some of them are thinking, look, I'm producing and I'm adding my magic and my talent to this, I should automatically not just get payment, but get a percentage of the master. Like,
Okay.
is that?
Well, when you say a percentage of the master, though, that could mean two things. It could mean that they're just getting paid a percentage of the money you make off the master, or are they saying they want to co-own the ownership of the master copyright with you? So that you got to be clear on that. Now, it's not unusual. It's not unusual to pay a producer a percentage of the income, like I just said, 20% on average, after you've recouped your costs. But to give somebody ownership, that's usually only if you didn't pay them up front or you paid them very little. Then they might be a co-owner of the master with you, or at least until such time as you pay them what they should have been paid. Because I have a lot of clients will work with a producer on spec or pay them very little, and they'll have an agreement that says, okay, normally you make $2,500 a master fee. I'm only paying you $500 now. So you're going to co-own the master with me. But once I pay you the balance, or I get a record deal or something and I make up for it, then you have to transfer me the remaining rights, Yeah, I mean, these are the kind of things, if that makes any sense. There's like a gap where you could take care of that gap fee later and then take away any ownership they had. Because the ownership, it means they have control over it, and that's the problem. I'm always mostly concerned, and I keep coming back to that, is that the artist has control. An artist even if somebody cones something with you, as long as you can control what happens and be the administrator, maybe it's no big deal, but usually if somebody cones with you, even if they own 1% and you own 99, guess what? You need their mutual approval to do anything. And that could, and what if you have a falling out with them, or they die, or they disappear, and then you could be hamstrung, so that's why I think it's good to have an agreement or an email exchange that kind of covers that, so you don't have issues later.
So Ben, sorry, frog and throat. Ben, just to clarify two things, and I'm glad you mentioned this because I thought it was all the same. And now you're mentioning, so I understand obviously owning the master gives you control, but I didn't know there's a difference in the 20% paint. Like how would I word that or look for that in a template that says I'm okay with paying the 20%. But I just want to make sure I own the master.
Well, usually it would say, most producer agreements will say it's a work for hire and you're transferring me any ownership in the master.
Okay.
It's right in there. And in exchange for that, I'm going to pay you this fee and or also this back end royalty. And that's it. It's pretty clear. It can be, you can write it in plain English.
Okay.
But the main thing is you don't want them to own anything. Or if they do, and because some will insist that they co-own it because you paid them nothing or paid them very little on the front end. And by the way, I rep producers, so I'm not saying that's a bad thing. But then if that's the case, make sure you have them agree that you're still the administrator of the master.
Okay. Ben, last question. This is so helpful. This is so invaluable. Being the administrator of, whether it be like for a lot of the songs that I've written here in LA, it's been a lot of co-writes. And, I'm the artist behind it, but I've just met a lot of talented people who've like just given me their talent and their magic. But because it's been a lot of co-writes, that can get messy. Like, because I definitely want to be able to pick and choose the opportunities versus having to consult with all of these different co-writers. So should I also look up an administrator agreement for all of these different people that I've collaborated with, so that just so it's certified?
Yes. Well, why can't you just have like a one sheet split sheet that also doubles as an administration agreement where everybody's agreeing to their split, so it adds up to 100%, but they're also acknowledging that you administer, or at least have like what I call a blanket license to do whatever you want. You can release it, you can put it in a video, you can remix it, you can put it in a movie. You don't have to come back and ask their permission. They've pre-agreed, but they'll always get paid and credited. The only time you're going to have problems with that, if you're writing with somebody like Max Martin, guess what? They're signed to Sony Music or Universal Music, and then all of a sudden you got to deal with them to give you that permission, and they won't. But what I found at that level, those people are very professional, and if you need to do something, as long as you tell them, they'll turn it around very quickly. They don't block you. They usually don't block you, but you would, but if you're dealing with lower level people or newer people or people that aren't signed to publishing companies, you probably won't have any issue with them signing that.
Cool. Last tidbit. So I've got split sheets, but I don't have that at the bottom. Are there templates, or is it okay for me to just type that?
Just type it up. It's just again, plain English is fine. It's just the right of administration. That's all.
Okay. Thank you.
Which means you can speak on behalf of all the collaborators.
Okay.
Yeah.
Love it. Thank you so much.
Hey, Jimmy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm probably gonna have to run soon.
Okay.
But I don't know. I mean, I want to make sure everybody gets their question answered, but
Sure.
I didn't know if there was anything significant left.
No, that's pretty much it. The only thing that I was still concerned about was this whole thing with how these digital PRO kind of things like Cobalt and
Cobalt was purchased by Sony,
right.
So now Sony owns Cobalt, and Cobalt had a neighboring rights division, which is sort of like Sound Exchange for foreign versions of that. So I'm not sure what your question was about Cobalt. It's still a publishing company, by the way.
It's still a publishing company, but now being kind of like a PRO, isn't that sort of a conflict of interest in a way, or?
I didn't know they are a PR. I mean, you still have ASCAP, BMI, CSAC, and then the GMR, which is Irving Azoff's PRO. I don't know of any other PRO in the United States.
Well, Sound Exchange kind of works like a PRO, doesn't it?
No. Remember, PROs only handle songwriting performance. Sound Exchange handles master performance. It has nothing to do with songwriting. It's only digital performance of a vocal on a sound recording. So it has, we're talking like with a Beatles song, Sound Exchange would collect the vocal sound recording, digital performance like on Sirius XM radio, and then BMI or ASCAP would still collect the songwriting performance. So it's two different. It is a PRO, but it's a PRO for the master side of digital only. And then when you hear about neighboring rights, that's what that means in the foreign country. It's like Sound Exchange in a foreign country, because Sound Exchange is just for United States. But this MLC, it's a good idea. If you're already signed with a publishing company, they're going to do a deal with the MLC to collect the digital performance of like streaming, like Spotify plays. That's going to be like, and they'll handle that. But if you're a self-administered songwriter for your song or songs, you should join the MLC. It's free. You don't have to pay them anything. And apparently they're going to be really good. Of course, it just started in January, but at collecting, it's government backed, and it's supposed to be a great thing. Time will tell, but I don't know. I mean, it's brand new, so we don't really know, but it's becoming a big thing. But I think that the intent is to be helpful to songwriters to get paid. But remember, this MLC only covers audio streaming money. doesn't cover physical mechanicals, and it doesn't cover visual sync money like a YouTube video.
And what does MLC stand for?
Music Licensing Collective.
Okay.
It's part of that Music Modernization Act that got passed.
Right.
So it's one part of it, but I think it's a good idea. If you go to the Music Licensing Collective website, they have a really good, like explanation as to what they do and why. So if you're a songwriter, it's probably worth checking it out. Might take you 15 minutes to read it. Okay. And you're probably going to hear a lot more about it.
Yeah, we hope to in the future. And I'm sure our subsequent guest speakers will also be talking about that. Right, Chris?
Chris, are you an expert on it? Yeah.
Well, Chris will be our next guest speaker, actually.
Okay.
So
I dabble in a lot of things.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. The problem with some of these things when they're brand new is like nobody knows how it works yet. So it's like nobody's an expert on it.
Yeah. But I'm sure it's going to be good. Okay, well, I know you got to go. Is there any other people that have any other questions? Last chance. Either speak up or raise your hand real quick.
How do we get in touch with you, Ben?
Just Ben McLane. If you Google me, I have a website, benmclane.com. That's BENMCLANE. I'm on the internet, so,
Thanks for today.
and I've got an Instagram and Twitter and all that, but I still mostly, if you go to my website, I have an email, and I still like emails and phone calls, really. But these days I get hit up in lots of different ways. I can't even imagine what it's like to be an A&R person now, because there's so many ways to send music to people, and it's probably quite overwhelming. And
yeah, that's the reason why we didn't have a listening session tonight, because I knew there would be a lot of questions, and I'm glad that you're here for us. We appreciate that, Ben. Also, you have some really good stuff, some frequently asked questions FAQ on your site, which we really appreciate that.
Well, on my site, I do. Many years ago, I used to write a lot of articles, and I've written hundreds over the years that have been published in different things, sometimes just blogs and stuff. But there's a lot of that on my website. But my website, I really probably should update it. I haven't done an update in a year just because I got thrown off with COVID. But anyway, I try to be accessible, and I try to get back to everybody. So if you ever need any legal assistance, please keep me in mind.
And how do we get your book?
It's Music Business and 10 Easy Lessons. Yeah, on Amazon, under Ben McLane. So, and really, it's a kind of more like a handbook. I just a couple of years ago, I just sat down, and there's I tried to pick out the 10 things that I felt like come up over and over and over again, mostly with kind of more newer and mid-level people in the business. So, but I tried to make it really easy to understand. But I talk about copyright, trademarks, band partnership agreements, publishing, music sync licensing, management, record deals, royalties, distribution, investors. And of course, there's other issues you can talk about, but that's kind of what I covered in my book.
Yeah, because that's one of the things that we always have done whenever we have our guest speakers in person. They can sell the merchandise that helps cover the cost for them to appear. So please buy Ben's book. And if you want, hit him up and hire him for some consultation and stuff too, because he is definitely one of the best. And again, we have Chris Fletcher. Thank you, Chris, so much for coming. Chris will be our next guest speaker. And again, she's got a whole lot of cred. I've known her for a while now, and we look forward to having you. Do you want to say anything about you coming in April?
Well, basically, we haven't discussed what I'm going to talk about, but I work with DIY artists all the time. And so I've started a whole new Music Biz Mentors sessions that I do. And for me, it's all about getting the DIY artist careers running forward. And so from performing to getting online to putting your website together and everything in between. So.
Yep. And she knows exactly what she's talking about. She was hired at the Musicians Institute just for that kind of stuff, amongst other things. So she's definitely going to be a really good guest speaker in April. So please mark your calendars, first Wednesday in April. And also third Wednesday in this month, that's March 17th, we'll be having our usual showcase. You're all welcome to come play. Again, same thing. Send an email to showcase@songnet.info to sign up. Steve will get you set up on the list, and it's always a great one. You know, one of the things that I've heard is that people really like our showcase because being more writer oriented, we hear some incredible songs, and we look forward to that too. So thank you once again, Ben. We really appreciate you being here. Wow.
Thank you, Ben.
Thanks, everybody.
Great
Bye.
information.
Thank you, Ben.
So we'll see you guys next time. Until
Thanks,
then, you have a
Jimmy.
good one.
Thanks, Stephen.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Okay, you guys have a good one. Good night.
Bye.
Great workshop, guys.